Hello, friends. So today I'm working on a mixed media layout, and I'm starting with my base, which is basil marshmallow cardstock. It's nice and thick and really accepts mixed media. I first start by creating a layer of Liquitex gesso, and I scrape that on using an old gift card. And I do this repeatedly until almost all of the gesso has been thinly layered down onto the paper. So I keep going for several minutes doing this. Um, each time I'm rotating that paper slightly, then carefully scraping down that gesso and rotate again and do the same thing over and over again. And again, that helps to create nice, thin, even layers. It creates a nice, smooth background that really seems to accept mixed media, especially water-based mixed media, very well. So at some point, I'm going to be bringing out my heat tool, and I'll be very carefully drying both the top and the bottom of this paper. And that will help to eliminate warping. So I don't show all of me drying the paper, but you get the idea here. All right, so I'm going to be using this photo of my house at Thanksgiving time. We got a substantial amount of snow um, on Thanksgiving Day. It was quite crazy. I think it ended up being about 8 to 10 inches. Um, in the high desert of Southern California. So I'm using the December Hip Kit Club Kit, and I'm using right now. I'm sorting through my embellishments. And this particular set of embellishments is an exclusive to Hip Kit, and it is titled So Frosty. And I'm pulling out houses and snowflakes and also things that you might wear. Or you'll see I'm going to pull out a coffee cup in a minute. There it is. And so I have this idea of creating this line of houses with snowflakes above it. And then on the bottom, I'm thinking about creating almost like a clothing line with like the sweater or the socks and the mittens. So um, and I also pulled out a penguin because I love penguins, and I thought I'm going to figure out how to get that little penguin in here. So again, just sorting through those embellishments, I start to head over to my other set of embellishments there and decide, nope, not interested. That cardstock sticker sheet is from Crepe Paper. Right now, this is my typical process. I start with my photo and then I go through my papers and just start quickly sorting papers that I might be interested in using. Just because I pull them out doesn't mean that I'm committed to using it, but it just gives me a place to start. I'll describe in later detail the papers that I use. And I will be pulling out some cardstock there, and that cardstock color is going to be, it's Basil Rain. And I really liked it because the photo um, was just going to be too white on the page. I'm first going to go ahead and get my paper set up with the mixed media. So you'll see me pull that out in just a second here. And I'm kind of putting some papers back that I realize I'm not going to use. I'll scooch those off to the side at some point. And then I'll begin my mixed media process. This helps to drive my, my color choice for my mixed media, and kind of gives me some definition of what I want it to look like. I am using today Lindy's Magicals, which are to die for. They're probably my favorite medium to work in. And I have selected Jana's Jade, Martina's Marigold, and Andrea's Azaleas. And I ended up not using one of those colors, which you'll see as you watch the video. But first I'm going to start off with Jana's Jade, and I'm going to go ahead and apply that powder directly to the paper. And then very carefully, I add some clean water. This is using a little pipette. So I'm a teacher and I have some leftover supplies and stuff from my classroom. So this is just a pipette, and I use that to grab some clean water. And I'm thinking about a horizontal design. So which is why my water there is horizontal. I am using gravity and manipulating that paper to mix the color with the water. And it's fun to do that. I don't always do this, but it is certainly fun. I'm adding a little bit more water because I want some more movement with that paint on the paper. You'll see me go in with a clean brush and just moisten up the paper so that the paint will flow into some additional areas here. So again, just kind of back and forth, letting that paint flow, creating some drips. And you see, by doing this, I'm creating some variations in the paint colors. Some areas are very dark and some areas are very light. And at this point, I'm going to go in and set the paint. So I'm drying this up, and I'm also angling my heat tool so that I'm pushing the water into other areas, and that will create, again, those darker areas as well as those lighter areas. Off to the right, you'll notice that I have a towel there that's kind of covered in paint. So, little secret of mine, I went over to Harbor Freight and I picked up like a 10 or a 20 pack of shop towels. I also could have picked those up at Home Depot now that I think about it. But anyway, I have kept those for years, and when they get really gross and grody, I throw them in the washing machine, and they come out pretty clean. Okay, so continuing to dry that paint. At some point, you'll see me come in with a towel and just pick up some of that, some of the paint where it's still pretty wet. But still just, angling my paper, letting that paint flow, creating those lines of colors, those variations. It just adds to the effect. This is artwork, and it's not all going to look exactly the same. These variations is what makes it unique. And I thought about cutting out some of this where I dry, but I get asked a lot of questions on how I create my backgrounds. So I decided to go ahead and leave in most of this so that you could see that it is kind of a work. There is a lot of work that goes into the background. And just by manipulating that paint, adding in some water, either with a paintbrush or something like a pipette or even a spray bottle, creates unique effects on the paper. And most importantly, dry the back of your paper. I cannot stress that enough. Again, it really helps to minimize the warping that your paper will experience. At this point, I go in and I add some of the Andrea's Azalea paint, which is pink. And I kind of screwed up. But, you know, it's art, so nothing is a screw up. I wanted my paint to be in 3 different spots, as you can see where I dropped that in. I really should have dropped that in one at a time instead of all at the beginning, because now it's really hard for me to manipulate my paper, because otherwise I'll fling that powder all over my desk. So in hindsight, I should have done like one section at a time, but I end up making it work, so not all is lost. You'll notice that the paint kind of goes on like very pink, but as I continue to move it across the blue paint, it does pick up some of the blue color, and that is quite all right by me. I love color so much, and I love the variations that it creates, but that's just something for you to keep in mind. So again, using my my heat tool to dry some of the color, pushing the wet paint up into certain areas to where it will become a little bit darker, and then you'll see that in other areas it's much lighter. You'll notice in the area that's on the screen right now that it is, it's no longer that light pink color. It's kind of that, it's like a lavender at this point, and that's because that pink and blue have mixed together to create that lavender color. I take my shop towel and I just dab up some of that extra water and give it a quick once over with the tool, and then I'll go ahead and work on another section. So again, I typically work in groups of 3. It's probably my favorite design strategy. Groups of 3 is very pleasing to the eye, and when I work in groups of 3, I like to have my focal point be somewhere in the middle. So my picture will be going in the middle of that section there. And drying that area, and then picking up some of that extra paint there, and then going ahead and working in that lower section, adding a little bit more water. You can't quite see it. Maybe you can. Up at the very top, you'll notice that I have a jar, and it actually says dirty, and then I have one right next to it that says clean. So I have 2 jars of water on my desk at all time, and always, you know, I draw the water that I'm adding to the page from my clean jar, and I keep them in jars with lids. Otherwise, my cats are jerks, and they would throw them off of my desk or drink my yucky paint water. I love how the paint just kind of like zips across the page with the heat tool. And then again, you'll see me come in and dab some of that off. All right, and getting the back of that, and now I'm ready to rock and roll here. So I start to pull out my Martinez Marigold paint, and then I decide, you know what, I think I'm not going to use it at this time. So I go ahead and put my picture down in the middle, and I realize that my picture blends into my background just too much. It's too light. So I'm going to end up mounting my picture on some of that solid cardstock. But before I do that, I remember I have a couple of scraps of paper. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off a strip of that plaid paper, which, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. Hello. Actually, all of the papers in this month's kit are gorgeous. That one is called... All right, so that plaid paper is from Pretty Little Studio, and it is called Frozen Sky. It's from the Glitter and Ice collection, and that is on the B side. And then I'm going to be using, it's like a snowflake paper, and that one's from Crepe Paper, and the collection is called Snowflake, and the paper is called Snowcapped. And I love that the gold snowflakes that are on that paper. Very pretty. I'm really into torn edges right now, and so pretty much everything must have a torn edge. The next paper that I'm going to be using is from Heidi Swap, and the collection is called Honey and Spice, and the paper is called Harmony. And the B side is the side that has that pale pink with gold leaves. And you see I cut a strip of that, and then I tear off the sides of it. And I used my perfect layers to mat my photo onto that basil cardstock, which is called Rain. So now I go in and I add some of the little houses from the exclusive embellishment kit. And I'm just using foam to mount up or to rise up some of those houses. And I had this kind of internal struggle about which I wanted under the photo or on top of the photo. And then in the end, I didn't put any under the photo there. So I actually usually buy like a bulk pack of 4x6 foam, and then I mean I've had it for probably 2 or 3 years, and I have yet to run out. It's been very nice to have in my stash. I'm quickly going through my my embellishments again because I remembered that there were these little trees, and I thought it would be fun to add some little trees onto my little street scene, even though we don't actually have a front yard tree. That is a story for another day. I wanted to use this wreath, and I wanted to use it in the lower section, so I kind of placed that down. I place some of the snowflakes up in the top area, and I pull out some of the clothing embellishments, so the socks, the mittens, the hat, and the sweater. And I was trying to figure out how to use them, but unfortunately my brain is too logical, and I'm like, my sweater cannot be bigger than my house. So I end up scooping that off of my paper and throwing it off to the side. I pull off one of the cardboard stickers from Crepe Paper, and I add that over to the right. I raise up some of my snowflakes using the foam, and again, still kind of working in that design of 3. I have the 3 snowflakes up at the top. I have the houses below it, which kind of act as 2 clusters. And then on the lower right side, all of that area kind of acts as 1. And so it balances out the other side. I add some of glossy accents behind behind that tree. I raise up the Hello Winter here so that it sits on top of the photo as well as on top of the houses there in that cluster. I'm going to move on to my title, and please learn from me. I normally use wax paper to put my title down. This time I didn't. And you'll see I end up moving it like 100 times, it seems like. The Black Alphabet is by Thickers, and it is called Comfort, and it's so pretty. It has like these little snowflakes, like the sides of snowflakes. It's just gorgeous. One of my favorites. The Winter also comes from Thickers, and that is called Chill. And that particular pack, it's just a bunch of phrases. It's super, super cute. And then finally, The Land is also from Thickers, and it is called Rose. And I'm really into mixing alphabets right now. I just love how it looks. I go ahead and just decide to add a little bit of that other paper there to the bottom to balance out the paper or the design there. So that is it. I hope you enjoyed the process. Thank you so much for watching.